Hi, I'm Jennifer, 34 years old and married to Jake for just over a year now. Most of my days revolve around my laptop as I teach students from all corners of the globe. Life was cruising along smoothly until, well, it wasn't. Jake and I live in a fantastic house that my parents left me, spacious, cozy, and entirely ours. That was until recently when Jake's parents, Martha and Bob, moved in just down the road. At first, their visits were a pleasant addition, but soon, the pleasantness turned into something far less enjoyable. Martha, with her lifetime badge of housewifery, began nitpicking everything from my cooking to the way I maintained the house. Her standards were astronomically high. "Jennifer, darling, this pasta is a bit bland, don't you think?" she'd say, scrunching her face like she'd bitten into something sour. And as for the house, she preached about keeping it spotless, insisting, "You do want to keep Jake happy, don't you?" I bit my tongue 1,000 times every time Martha made one of her comments. I tried to explain, hoping for a shred of understanding, but she'd just wave her hand dismissively and say, "Nonsense. It's about prioritizing. Your job is to take care of the home and Jake, of course." One day, she even had the audacity to inspect Jake's laundry right in front of me. "You're letting him wear this. The colors have faded. You're not using the right detergent." I was fuming, my fists clenched so tightly I felt like I could turn coal into diamonds. But I swallowed my anger, trying to keep the peace. "Jennifer, they're not staying with us permanently. It's just a visit," I told myself. But those visits felt like they were stretching the fabric of my sanity thinner and thinner. One sunny afternoon, while setting up my laptop for a tutoring session, I heard a truck pull up outside. Peeking through the window, my jaw dropped. There was Jake helping his parents unload boxes and furniture from a massive moving truck. My heart sank. This wasn't happening. Martha, the matriarch, was directing the move with an air of ownership, while Bob looked content, not lifting a finger as he surveyed his new domain. Jake caught my eye and gave me an apologetic shrug. I stormed outside. "Jake, what on earth is going on?" "Oh, hey, babe. Surprise, Mom and Dad are moving in with us. Isn't that great?" He was all smiles, completely oblivious to my rising panic and fury. "Great? When were you planning on discussing this life-altering decision with me, your wife?" I practically spat the words out, incredulous. "Calm down, babe. It's just temporary. They're having some financial troubles, and this way, they can rent out their place for extra cash. It's a win-win," Jake said, trying to wrap his arm around me. But I shrugged him off. Martha chose that moment to glide over, her pastel cardigan and pearls making her look like a commanding figure. "Jennifer, darling, it's so sensible. We're all family here. Plus, you have so much space in this lovely house of yours. It was meant to be shared." Shared? This house was my sanctuary, a gift from my parents who were no longer with us. It wasn't just some communal flop house. I tried to keep my composure, but my voice betrayed me. "Martha, with all due respect, this is my house. Don't you think this is something that should have been discussed?" "Oh, sweetheart, don't be like that. Family helps family. We'll make such lovely memories together," Martha said, patting herself on the back while Bob nodded along, adding his 2 cents. "Yeah, Jennifer, it's about time we all got closer, don't you think?" Closer? I was at a loss for words. The arrogance and entitlement were overwhelming. Jake looked between me and his parents, clearly torn. "Come on, Jenny, it'll be fine. What's mine is yours, and what's yours is ours, right?" Wrong, so very wrong. But as angry as I was, I couldn't bring myself to kick them out immediately. Maybe it was shock or that small voice reminding me of what family meant to Jake. So I did what I'd become an expert at. I swallowed my fury, forced a smile, and welcomed them into my home. As days turned into weeks, the so-called temporary arrangement felt more like a life sentence. Martha and Bob had made themselves completely at home, critiquing my cooking, commenting on my cleaning habits, and generally making my life a living nightmare. Meanwhile, Jake was either at work or playing the role of the oblivious husband. Each day, from the moment I woke up to the second I collapsed into bed, was a marathon of juggling work and the relentless demands of my new housemates. One morning, as I was preparing for an important tutoring session, Martha barged into my makeshift office, a deep frown already etched on her face. "Jennifer, this place is a pigsty. When was the last time you dusted? And those cups from yesterday are still in the sink." Martha's voice cut through the quiet, her arms crossed in disapproval. I clenched my jaw, my fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Martha, I have back-to-back sessions today. I'll get to it when I can, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. She huffed, her expression hardening. In my day, we kept a clean house and worked. It's about managing your time better. Managing my time better? I wanted to scream, but instead, I bit my tongue and forced myself to focus on the screen, though it was hard to see through the red haze of my anger. Bob wasn't any better. He had an uncanny knack for needing something right when I was in the middle of explaining complex concepts to my students. Jennifer, where's lunch? I'm starving, he bellowed from the living room, completely ignoring the do not disturb sign on my door. It's in the fridge, Bob. Just warm it up, I replied, my voice strained with the effort to stay polite. What do I look like, a chef? Can't you take a break and fix something yourself? He retorted, his voice booming through the thin walls. Jake, bless him, tried to be the peacemaker, but his efforts often felt like they just added to my frustration. Jenny, can't you just drop it for today? Let's have a quiet dinner, he'd suggest, attempting to smooth over the latest flare-up. Drop it as if I was the one causing all the drama over lunch and dust bunnies. The pinnacle of this daily grind came one evening when I was trying to wrap up my sessions for the day. Martha chose that moment to lecture me on the importance of a tidy home. Jennifer, a cluttered house is a sign of a cluttered mind. Maybe if you tidied up more, you'd be less stressed. Less stressed? I almost laughed at the absurdity. Instead, I stood up and faced her directly. Martha, I'm working. This cluttered office is paying our bills right now. And maybe if you're so concerned about the cleaning, you could help out. Her face turned a shade of red I hadn't seen before. I'm a guest in this house, Jennifer. It's not my job to clean. The word guest echoed mockingly in my mind. Some guests, they were turning my life and home upside down. That night, as I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, I couldn't help but reflect on the absurdity of it all. Here I was, working hard to provide, to teach, and to keep some semblance of peace in my own home, only to be criticized at every turn. Jake's soft snoring next to me was the only sound in the dark room. I turned to look at him, wondering how we ended up here. How did we go from newlyweds excited about our future to barely speaking because his parents were driving a wedge between us? 3 months into what felt like the world's longest invasion of privacy, Jake came home early one day, looking as if he had just lost a fight with a bear. Jenny, he began, his voice heavy with fatigue. I got fired, Jake blurted out as soon as he walked in, not even waiting to sit down. His parents were probably out, wreaking havoc somewhere else, and he made me promise not to tell them. Just what I needed. Now the burden was entirely on me. My online tutoring gigs were no longer just a way to keep busy or fund a few extras. They were a lifeline. I threw myself into work, stretching my days as thin as possible. Before long, I wasn't just tutoring. I was running my own online school. A small part of me buzzed with pride, but I kept it to myself. No need to add more fuel to the already blazing inferno of our household dynamics. Money was tighter than a jar sealed for a century. Every penny had to be squeezed until it pleaded for mercy before being spent. Eventually, I had to confront Martha and Bob. Look, I know this is awkward, but I need help with the bills. Maybe you could cover half the rent, I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Their reaction was as if I'd suggested they fly to the moon. What do you mean? Jake's got it covered. He makes plenty, Bob scoffed, waving off my request as if it were a bad smell. Yeah, about that, I began, but Jake's pleading look stopped me. He wasn't ready for them to know the truth. Later, he pulled me aside, whispering, just a little longer, Jenny. I'll find something soon, I promise. Promises, right. Meanwhile, I was juggling teaching, cooking, cleaning, and playing referee, all while trying to smile through gritted teeth. Martha and Bob seemed to have turned complaining into an Olympic sport, barging into my office during my tutoring sessions as if I were hosting afternoon tea rather than running a business. Jennifer, this is unacceptable. You're always locked away in here. Why are you going to make time for us? Martha demanded one day, standing in the doorway with her arms crossed while I was in the middle of explaining algebra to a 15-year-old. Martha, I'm working. Can this wait? I hissed, trying to keep my voice down. No, it can't. We're family and you're neglecting us, she shot back, oblivious to the fact that I was trying to make ends meet. Bob wasn't any better. When's dinner? We're starving, and you're just sitting around, he grumbled on another occasion, completely ignoring the stack of papers and open textbooks around me. Sitting around, really, Bob? I snapped, frustration bubbling up despite my best efforts to stay composed. I'm teaching right now, and dinner is whenever you make it. I snapped, my patience fraying like an old rope. Jake was always apologetic, constantly whispering, "Thanks for holding us together, Jenny. It'll get better." But better felt like a distant dream, one we were never getting closer to. As days turned into weeks, I wondered how much longer I could keep this up. One evening, as we sat down for dinner, Martha pulled out a glossy travel brochure, her eyes sparkling. "Look at this, dear," she said, sliding the booklet across the table to me. "We're thinking of a little getaway. A vacation. What do you think? A scarf or a shell as a souvenir?" Before I could even process the absurdity of her question, she dropped another bomb. "Darling, if you could spare $2,000 for us, that would be just peachy. Just for some pocket money, you know." I stared at her, dumbfounded. My fork clattered onto my plate, my appetite completely vanished. "Spare $2,000? I echoed, incredulous. "For a vacation?" Bob nodded as if this was the most reasonable request in the world. "Yeah, for the little extras. We wouldn't want to miss out on the fun stuff." The room spun. This was beyond outrageous. It felt like they were living in a fantasy world where money grew on trees and I was their gardener. I couldn't hold back any longer. "How long do you plan to live at my expense?" I demanded, my voice rising. "You don't pay for anything. No rent, no groceries, and now you want me to fund your vacations too." Martha and Bob exchanged glances, clearly taken aback by my outburst. "Well, we thought Jake was handling all that," Bob said, trying to sound innocent. I turned to Jake, my eyes blazing. "And what about you? Do you think this is okay?" Jake squirmed in his seat, mumbling something incoherent. "Not only that," I continued, steamrolling ahead, "you barge into my office, interrupt my work, and have zero respect for my personal space. I've had it." There was a tense silence. Finally, Jake, his face a mask of frustration, spoke up. "Why are you talking to my parents like that? They're just trying to enjoy life." "Enjoy life on my hard-earned money?" I snapped back. I shot back, disbelief lacing my words. That's when Martha, ever the dramatist, began her performance. Tears welled up in her eyes as she wailed about my ingratitude. "After all we've done for you, we even told Jake he should divorce you despite everything." The word divorce sliced through the tension like a knife. I turned to Jake, my heart pounding in my throat. "Is that true?" Jake's face went from red to white, a guilty look flashing in his eyes before he averted his gaze. Seizing the moment, Martha clutched at her chest and gasped dramatically. "My pills are upstairs, please." Concern washed over me despite my anger. I stood up abruptly, the need to ensure she was okay momentarily overshadowing my fury. "Fine, I'll get your medicine," I said, leaving the dining room in a daze. My mind raced with accusations, deceit, and now this talk of divorce. My world seemed to be unraveling thread by thread, leaving me to pick up the pieces. I had barely reached the top of the stairs when I realized I didn't even know which medicine Martha needed. Turning back, I was unprepared for what I overheard. Jake's voice, usually warm and familiar, was barely a whisper, yet every word struck like a hammer. "Mom, you nearly blew it tonight. We need to get her to sell the house first. Talking about divorce now will just spook her." My heart stopped. Divorce. Sell my house. The pieces clicked together in a jarring mosaic of betrayal. Martha's voice hissed in response. I know, but keeping up this charade is exhausting. She's not as clueless as you think." Jake's voice was insistent, almost desperate. "Just stick to the plan. Make things hard for her, unbearable even. She'll cave and sell the house to get away from me, and then we can do whatever we want. But not before. If she divorces me now, I get nothing from the sale." The coldness in his voice, the calculated manipulation, it was all laid bare. My knees felt weak, my heart shattered. This was their plan. My husband and his parents plotting against me in my own home. Jake continued, oblivious to my silent presence. "We'll be set once this is done. Sell the old place too, and we can finally get something better. Just lay off the big purchases for now. Don't draw any attention." I stood there, frozen, a statue of disbelief and hurt. They were supposed to be my family. How could they do this? At the dining room door, I paused, gathering my composure. The mask of ignorance was now my best defense. When I walked back in, I found Martha clutching her chest, her distress as convincing as ever. "Oh dear, I forgot to ask which medicine you needed," I said, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. Martha quickly shifted her act. "It's all right, dear. I just need a moment." It's the excitement of the evening, you know. Jake glanced at me, something flickering in his eyes. Was it guilt or fear? I couldn't tell. Everything okay, Jenny? He asked. I met his gaze, a hollow laugh echoing inside me. Fine. Just tired, I guess. It's been a long day. As we finished dinner in silence, my mind raced. They didn't know I knew their plans, and I intended to keep it that way. For now, I would play the part, bide my time, and plan my next move carefully. They wanted a game. They'd get one, but on my terms. The next morning, I didn't waste any time. I canceled my classes, feeling a mix of nerves and determination. Today wasn't about teaching, it was about reclaiming my life. My first stop was the lawyer's office. I laid everything out, the deception, the manipulation, their plans against me. He reassured me, explaining that the law protected my inheritance. My house was mine alone, divorce or not. With divorce papers in hand, I headed back home, my resolve strengthening with every step. The scene that greeted me was predictably frustrating. Martha immediately started in on me. Where have you been all day? We've been waiting for you to make dinner, she snapped, her voice dripping with disdain. I met her gaze, my patience worn thin. I'm not your cook or your maid. That ends now. Jake attempted to smooth things over, his voice too casual. Maybe this is a sign we should sell the house and start fresh somewhere else. His parents nodded eagerly, clearly liking where this was going. I couldn't help it. I laughed. The absurdity of it all. Their faces, it was too much. Oh, Jake, I know about your plan. All of it. Silence crashed down like a wave. Jake's face went white and Martha's mouth snapped shut. What plan? Jake managed, his voice shaky and guilty. Taking a deep breath, I laid the divorce papers on the table. This plan, we're done. I want you and your parents out of my house. The outrage was immediate. Martha was the first to explode. You can't do this. We're family. Family doesn't plot against each other. I shot back, my voice firm. Jake tried to argue, to plead, but I was unmoved. I'm not falling for it, Jake. It's over. I've already spoken to a lawyer. His defeat was evident as he realized the gravity of the situation. They had no legal ground to stand on, no emotional manipulation left to play. Reluctantly, with anger and frustration boiling over, Jake and his parents packed their things and left. After they were gone, the silence in the house was deafening, but it was the sound of freedom. I sat alone in the dining room, the echoes of their departure still resonating off the walls. It was over. I could finally breathe again, but the weight of what had transpired hung heavily in the air. I wasn't sure what to do with myself. The routine I had been so accustomed to, despite its toxicity, was gone. I decided to call my best friend Sarah. If anyone could understand, it was her. Hey, it's me, I said when she picked up. Jennifer, what's wrong? You sound off. Sarah's voice was filled with concern. I laughed, a mix of relief and disbelief in my tone. You won't believe what's happened. Jake and his parents, they're gone. I kicked them out. Sarah's surprise was evident. Girl, what happened? So I told her everything, from the overheard conversation to the visit to the lawyer and the final showdown. As I spoke, the reality of my newfound freedom began to sink in. Wow, Jennifer, I don't even know what to say. Are you okay? She asked after a moment of silence. Yeah, I think I am. Better than I've been in a long time, I admitted, a smile spreading across my face. We chatted a bit longer, her support lifting my spirits even further. Hanging up, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The house felt different now. It was truly mine again. I could do whatever I wanted with it, fill it with new memories, maybe even redecorate. The days that followed were a blur of activity. I started making small changes around the house, clearing out reminders of Jake and his parents. With each box I packed away, I felt lighter, more in control of my destiny. I also threw myself into my online school, pouring every ounce of energy into something that was truly mine. It wasn't just a distraction. It was a lifeline, pulling me out of the murky waters of betrayal and onto solid ground. My students, my lessons, they gave me purpose and a reason to look forward to each day. One afternoon, as I was prepping for a webinar that had garnered interest from corners of the globe I'd only dreamed of reaching, my phone rang. The screen flashed Martha's name, a name I hadn't seen or thought about in what felt like a lifetime. Curiosity overcame me, and I answered, bracing myself for whatever came next. Jennifer, dear, it's Martha. We need your help, she stammered, her voice laced with a desperation I'd never heard from her before. I hesitated, memories of their betrayal flashing bright and hot. What's happened? Our house, the one we rented out, it's gone. It burned down because of some electrical fault and, well, the insurance, she trailed off, the weight of her omission hanging between us. And you didn't pay the insurance on time, so now you're left with nothing. I finished for her, not without a trace of cold satisfaction. Yes, exactly. We were wondering, hoping really, that maybe we could stay with you just for a little while, she pressed, each word more desperate than the last. The audacity of her request left me speechless for a moment. After everything, they still saw me as a safety net, their backup plan. I found my voice steadier and colder than I intended. No, Martha, that's not possible. You're strangers to me now. Later, through the grapevine of mutual acquaintances, I learned about Jake's new reality. He'd taken a job far below the expectations and lifestyle he once held dear, just to scrape together enough for a roof over their heads and the basics. Part of me wanted to take satisfaction in his fall from grace, but another, deeper part of me just felt tired of the anger, the resentment. It was time to truly move on.
I had a bad feeling about it from the start, but not attending my brother's wedding was never an option. I was cautious, given what had happened before, but I never expected it to happen again.
If you're going to harass my wife, just leave.
Standing behind him was the bride, Emma, who didn't even try to hide her smirk. I took a deep breath. Wake up before you get hurt. If that didn't get through to them, I'd have to make them face reality. At that moment, an unexpected voice spoke up.
What are you talking about?
As shocking truths were revealed one after another, their faces grew more and more shocked. My name is Sarah Inman, and I'm 40 years old. I'm an ordinary office worker at a company. I've lived my life focused on my career and have never had a romantic partner. It's not that I wasn't interested, but I felt unqualified for a family. I didn't know how to love, and that's why I felt this way. My family consists of my parents and my much younger brother, Chris. I'm in my 40s and have years of work experience, but Chris is only 24. He graduated college and has been working for 3 years now. Chris's existence became a source of pain for me over the years. Chris was my parents' long-awaited second child. After I was born, my mother struggled with infertility and never paid much attention to me. Even when I got good grades, it was treated as nothing special. I'm old enough now not to care about praise, but as a child, it hurt deeply. I craved their love, but never dared to ask for it. One day, their faces lit up with joy.
You're going to have a sibling.
My father said that, and my mother cried with joy. It wasn't just joy, it was like a celebration. Once they found out about the pregnancy, they left me with my grandparents to celebrate over a meal. From the time Chris was in the womb, my mother would sing lullabies, and my father eagerly bought baby supplies.
We can't use Sarah's old stuff for Chris. That's right, it's cheap anyway, let's toss it.
As a teenager, I overheard these conversations and felt my heart harden. But I pretended not to notice because I was the older sister. When Chris was born, they threw a huge party with relatives, something they never did for me. I grew more and more resentful. My father had always wanted a son, so they doted on him endlessly. As Chris grew, I felt the gap between us widen. Even though I was still a child, I grew up fast emotionally and never learned how to seek affection. I don't think my parents meant to hurt me, but the words "because you're the older sister" became a curse to me. I grew up without knowing what family love was. That's why I decided to dedicate myself to my career instead of trying to build a family. And yet Chris constantly shattered those feelings. He was spoiled by our parents. They paid for all his tuition while I had to take out student loans and work to cover my expenses. I still remember my mother's cold words when I was a high school senior.
If you don't get a full scholarship, we won't help with tuition at all.
Determined to go to college, I earned a full scholarship and worked part-time to support myself. Our family wasn't struggling financially, but my parents refused to co-sign for a loan.
We won't be your guarantors. If you mess up, it'll be Chris who suffers.
That's how my parents treated me, the eldest daughter. Watching this, Chris naturally started treating me with the same disregard.
Why are you always at home, sis?
After I graduated from college, I worked from home, and Chris, only in elementary school at the time, asked me that with a smirk. He wasn't innocently asking, and there was malice behind it. My parents sighed and explained to Chris.
Your sister's a failure, that's why. Don't turn out like her.
I clenched my fists and glared at them. But they didn't notice. Since Chris was born, I was practically invisible to them. Chris grew up spoiled and selfish, even towards our grandparents. Our paternal grandparents had significant wealth, including real estate. By middle school, Chris was already trying to secure his place as their heir. He charmed them to ensure they would leave everything to him. I was the only one who knew about his true nature.
You still have that miserable look on your face, sis. No wonder you're in your 40s and still single.
One Mother's Day, I brought some flowers to my mom. Deep down, even at this age, I wanted to feel loved by her, but my hopes were crushed.
Oh, you shouldn't have. Instead, could you help with our living expenses? We spent too much on Chris's education and our retirement funds are tight.
Without hesitation, she threw the flowers into the trash. Chris washed with a smirk. I had already decided that this would be my last time coming home for holidays. Chris was talking about getting married, and I knew that things would only get worse. Even though Chris was irresponsible, once he started thinking about marriage, he began giving small gifts to our parents and grandparents. He was clearly trying to secure more money for the wedding. I had given gifts too, but they were never appreciated. My mother always said,
"It's only natural for you to repay the people who raised you."
She never once said thank you. Even Emma, Chris's fiancée, noticed the unfair treatment and would often laugh at me during family events. "Poor older sister." She'd say that under her breath and giggle. I couldn't stand attending these gatherings anymore. I decided that this would be my last family holiday and I wouldn't come back. Before I knew it, the holidays came around again. Emma was all smiles, charming the relatives while I was relegated to kitchen duty.
"Sarah, this is your job as the older sister. We can't let Emma do any of the work."
She treated Emma like a guest while forcing all the responsibilities on me. To be honest, it was easier that way. If I mingled with the relatives, they'd just try to set me up for an arranged marriage. Our family's wealth and status meant people were eager to get close to us. They figured if I married into their family, they could benefit, but I had no intention of getting married or playing into their schemes. This holiday passed just like all the others, stressful and unpleasant. I returned to my apartment, determined to cut ties with my family for good. A few months later, I received a message saying that Chris was getting married and wanted to formally introduce his fiancée to the family. I was ordered by my father to return for the meeting. I wanted to refuse. After all, I'd just be an outsider at the gathering. But when my father scolded me for not attending my brother's introduction, I reluctantly took time off to go. I had already met Emma many times and didn't like her, so I planned to leave right after the introductions. But when I arrived, I noticed something strange. There wasn't a seat for me at the table. I had been expecting some form of petty harassment, but this was beyond what I anticipated. "Oh, I'm so sorry, Sarah. I didn't think you'd actually come, so I accidentally only made a reservation for 4. She pretended to cry as she apologized, clearly putting on a show. I had heard that she had experience in theater, and it showed.
"Emma can be such a scatterbrain, can't she?"
I almost couldn't hold back my anger, but I managed to keep calm. "Don't worry about it. I'll just leave. You 4 enjoy yourselves." I hid my clenched fists and left the scene. Normally, they'd find a way to make a seat for me, but no one even tried to stop me. That spoke volumes about how they felt. I swallowed the bitterness and left quietly. A few days later, I received an apology text from Emma asking to meet. The message was full of emojis and didn't feel sincere at all. I hadn't even given her my contact information. She must have gotten it from my parents or Chris. I didn't want to deal with them, but I agreed to meet her, thinking I might as well get it over with. The day we were supposed to meet, she showed up 2 hours late. "Oh my gosh, I'm so sorry. I accidentally gave you the wrong time." It was a ridiculous excuse, and I knew she was lying. She ignored all my calls during those 2 hours, and when she finally arrived, she wasn't even out of breath. She didn't feel the least bit sorry. "As an apology, I'll cover the meal today." I knew she didn't mean it. I just nodded and followed her into the restaurant. "So what do you want to talk about?" I wanted to get this over with quickly. "Well, since I'm marrying Chris, you're going to be part of my family now, and honestly, I'm not too thrilled about that." "Why not?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "Well, it's kind of embarrassing to have a sister-in-law who's over 40 and still single. I'll invite you to the wedding, but after that, I want to cut ties completely." With that, she slid a check across the table. "You're just staying single to get more of your grandparents' inheritance, aren't you? I'll give you this money if you agree to disappear from our lives." I remembered hearing from Chris that Emma's father was wealthy and she had access to as much money as she wanted. Whether that was true or not, I didn't care. I don't need your money. I'll cut ties as you wish, but don't ever contact me again.
Wow, jealous much? It's sad seeing an old woman take out her frustration on a younger bride.
My cheeks burned with anger, but I kept my cool. How you feel about me is your problem, not mine. I don't need this money and I won't take it. Emma's face hardened as she shoved the check into my bag.
You're taking it, whether you like it or not. This is a legal transaction now.
After spitting out those words, she walked out, leaving the check behind. After that day, I didn't see or hear from Emma or Chris for a while. I had been busy with work anyway, dealing with some issues at the office. But just as I was starting to forget about them, I received their wedding invitation in the mail. To be honest, I wanted to decline. Why should I celebrate a couple who treated me so poorly and practically disowned me? But Chris was still my brother and I felt obligated to attend. On the day of the wedding, I arrived at the venue and got in line for the reception. One of the women at the desk saw me and whispered,
Ew.
I don't miss her remark. Judging by her age, I assumed she was one of Emma's friends. It didn't matter to me what they thought, but being treated like that by a stranger was infuriating. What was that ew about? Did I do something to you? The two women exchanged glances before offering half-hearted apologies. I could tell they didn't mean it. The rest of the wedding was a blur. I had a splitting headache the entire time. By the time the ceremony was over and the reception began, I felt completely drained. I looked for my seat but couldn't find my name anywhere. There was no seat for me at any of the tables. Suddenly, Chris and Emma appeared in front of me even though it wasn't time for them to make their entrance. They were smiling at me in a way that made my skin crawl. They looked like mirror images of each other, both with the same smug expressions.
If you're going to harass my wife, you need to leave. I know you don't like Emma, but you need to get over it. You've always been jealous ever since we were kids. You couldn't handle someone else getting the attention for once.
I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Emma had been the one harassing me, but now they were twisting the story to make me like the villain. The guests began whispering, assuming I was at fault. My parents, who were in on this whole scheme, yelled at me as well.
You're an embarrassment. Leave now. If you care about Chris, you'll leave.
I stared at them, feeling a deep sense of betrayal. Wake up before you get hurt. I said this as calmly as I could, staring them down. But they ignored me and Emma started crying again, using the same theatrical tears as before.
I'm so sorry, but I forgot to reserve a seat for her. I've been so stressed preparing for the wedding.
Emma's friends glared at me, seeing her as the victim. The bride's side was clearly united against me. But then a voice cut through the room, silencing everyone.
How long are you going to keep up this charade?
Chris's eyes widened in shock.
Sam, what are you doing? I thought this was some kind of prank at first, but this is just ridiculous. I know Sarah isn't the kind of person to do the things you're accusing her of. So what's really going on here?
Sam had worked with me for years, and he knew my character well. He turned to Emma's friends, who averted their eyes.
Did any of you actually witness Sarah do anything wrong? Or are you just going along with what you were told?
The women looked uncomfortable, clearly unsure of how to respond. Sam's words seemed to shift the mood in the room. Some of Chris and Emma's guests started nodding in agreement. Realizing her act wasn't working, Emma's face twisted in frustration.
Are you saying I'm lying? Do you think I'd make all this up?
She was still trying to play the victim, but Sam wasn't buying it.
I've worked under Sarah for years, and I've never seen her mistreat anyone. So yes, I do think you're exaggerating, at the very least.
Emma's face turned red as she shot a glance at Chris.
Who is this guy and why is he butting in?
He's a friend of mine and works in a different department at my company.
Emma blinked, clearly caught off guard by this new information.
Wait, what? He works for my father's company?
Yeah, he's a friend from college.
The room fell silent as Emma processed this. She didn't expect someone connected to her family to defend me.
Well, it doesn't matter. This is between us. You don't need to get involved.
It matters when you're spreading lies about someone I respect.
The tension in the room was thick. Emma's attempts to discredit me were failing, and now she had a bigger problem. Realizing her theatrics weren't working, Emma suddenly started crying again.
You're all ganging up on me. I just wanted a peaceful wedding. Why can't you leave us alone, Sarah?
Sam wasn't fazed by her tears.
Crying won't change the facts. If you really believe Sarah has done something wrong, prove it.
At this point, some of Emma's friends started looking uncomfortable. They had likely been pulled into a drama without knowing the full story. But the truth was coming out and Emma was running out of excuses.
I've worked with Sarah long enough to know when someone's lying about her.
Sam's calm, unwavering stance seemed to crack Emma's confidence even further.
You don't understand. She's always been against me, ever since I got engaged to Chris.
Her voice was rising in desperation.
She's jealous of us, of our love, and now she's trying to ruin our wedding day.
Sam crossed his arms, unfazed.
You're projecting your own insecurities onto Sarah, and it's not working.
Emma's face turned a beet red, and she was about to say something when a new voice joined the conversation.
What's going on here?
Everyone turned to see Emma's father, Brian, the CEO of the company Chris and Sam worked for, entering the room.
I've been hearing things about today. I want to know the truth.
Chris paled, clearly not expecting his future father-in-law to step in at this moment.
Sir, it's just a misunderstanding. I wasn't asking you, Chris.
His cold tone made Chris fall silent.
I heard my daughter and her friends have been stirring up trouble. Is that true?
His question hung in the air, and Emma was visibly shaken.
Daddy, it's not like that. Sarah has been...
I want to hear it from Sarah.
I hadn't expected to be dragged into a family drama in front of the entire room, but at this point, there was no turning back. I've been quiet because I don't want to cause a scene at your daughter's wedding, but I can't stay silent while I'm being falsely accused. Emma's father listened, intently, his expression unreachable. From the start, Emma has treated me with contempt. She's been trying to push me out of the family. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to make waves, but now I've been publicly humiliated at her wedding. The room was dead silent as I spoke, and Emma's father frowned as he took in the information.
I see.
He turned to Emma, his eyes hard.
Is that true? Have you been harassing Sarah?
Daddy, no, she's lying. You can't believe her over me?
Then where's the evidence? You've been making a lot of accusations without any proof, and frankly, I'm getting tired of it.
Emma's tears dried up instantly and her face hardened. She had never expected her own father to turn against her. At that moment, her facade cracked entirely, and the truth was laid bare for everyone to see.
We'll deal with this later, but right now I think it's best if this wedding comes to an end. We'll take care of this mess in private.
With that, the guests were asked to leave, and the reception was effectively cancelled. I didn't expect anything to blow up this way, but in the end, the truth had come out. Emma had tried to humiliate me, but she was the one who ended up exposed in front of everyone. After the chaos of the wedding, I thought things would settle down, but I was wrong. A week later, I received a message from Chris.
Sarah, I'm sorry. Can we talk?
I ignored it. Then came another message and another, each one more desperate than the last. Chris had apparently been caught in a financial scandal that tied back to Emma's family, and now he was in serious trouble.
Please, Sarah, I need your help. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have sided with Emma.
I didn't respond. It was too late for apologies now. Chris had made his bed, and now he had to lie in it. I had spent my whole life being overlooked, dismissed, and humiliated by my family, but now I was finally free. I had no intention of going back. The end of my relationship with Chris, Emma, and even my parents wasn't the tragedy they made it out to be. It was a relief. I finally had the space to live my life without the weight of their toxicity dragging me down. And as for Emma and Chris, well, they were left to deal with the consequences of their own actions. I had no interest in what happened to them after that. My focus was on my own future now. Little did I know that future would soon include someone I hadn't expected, Sam. A few weeks after the wedding debacle, Sam confessed his feelings for me.
Sarah, I've admired you for a long time, and I think I'm falling in love with you.
His words took me by surprise. I wasn't sure how to respond at first, but there was something sincere in the way he said it. For the first time in years, I felt like I was being seen for who I truly was. And in that moment, I realized that maybe, just maybe, I could open my heart to someone new.
Oh, I don't want to rush you, but when you're ready, I'll be here.
His gentle smile warmed my heart, and I knew that this was the beginning of something good. After everything I had been through, I deserved a chance at real happiness. The weeks following Sam's confession were like a breath of fresh air in my life. For the first time in years, I felt lighter, as if a huge weight had been lifted off my shoulders. Sam didn't push me, and he kept his promise. He gave me space to process everything. We continued working together, but there was an unspoken understanding between us. Slowly, I started letting my guard down. Sam was patient, kind, and honest, qualities I hadn't experienced from anyone in a long time. As the months passed, our relationship blossomed into something more.
Sarah, I know we started out as colleagues, but I want more than that. I want to be with you, if you'll have me.
His words were simple but sincere, and I found myself smiling in a way I hadn't in years. I'd like that, Sam. I really would. From that moment on, our relationship grew deeper. It was peaceful, supportive, and real. It was a stark contrast to everything I had experienced with my family and with Chris. With Sam, I felt safe and respected, something I hadn't known I needed so much. As for my family, after the disastrous wedding, I officially cut ties with them. They tried reaching out, of course, my mother, my father, even Chris, but I ignored every message. I knew that engaging with them again would only pull me back into their toxic web. I was done with being their emotional punching bag. Cutting them off was hard at first, but the peace I gained from it was worth more than anything they could offer. Sam supported me through it all, never once making me feel guilty for my decision.
You deserve to live free from their influence. You're stronger than they give you credit for.
His encouragement was exactly what I needed to hear. Meanwhile, the fallout from Chris and Emma's wedding continued to ripple through their lives. Emma's lies, financial issues, and manipulation eventually caught up with her. Chris, too, found himself dealing with the legal ramifications of their actions. The last I heard, they were separated, and Chris was struggling to rebuild his life. I felt no satisfaction from hearing about their downfall. If anything, it reinforced my decision to stay away from them. Their drama was no longer my concern. My focus was on building a life that brought me joy and fulfillment. And with Sam by my side, that life was starting to take shape.
You've come so far, Sarah. I'm proud of you.
His words were always so genuine, and they filled me with a sense of pride I hadn't felt in a long time. One evening a year after the wedding disaster, Sam and I went out for a quiet dinner. As we sat in the candlelit restaurant, he looked at me with the same warmth and affection he always had.
I've been thinking about something for a while now.
His tone was serious but soft. I tilted my head, curious. What is it? He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small box, and my heart skipped a beat.
I want to spend the rest of my life with you, Sarah. Will you marry me?
The sincerity in his eyes was overwhelming, and for a moment, I was speechless. This was it, the moment I never thought would come. After everything I had been through, after all the hurt and disappointment, someone was asking me to share a future with them. Yes, I'll marry you. Sam's smile lit up the room, and as he slipped the ring onto my finger, I felt a surge of joy like never before. We had found each other in the midst of so much chaos, and now we were building something real together. The life I had always dreamed of, but never believed I deserved, was finally within reach. And with Sam by my side, I knew that my future would be filled with love, trust, and happiness. The past was behind me, and for the first time, I was truly free. Our wedding was small, intimate, and perfect. We didn't want anything grand or over the top, just our closest friends and the people who truly supported us. The day was filled with love, laughter, and a sense of peace that I hadn't known in years. Sam, looking as handsome as ever, stood at the altar waiting for me. As I walked down the aisle, I couldn't help but think about everything that had led me to this moment. The pain, the struggles, the heartbreak, it all seemed so distant now. What mattered was the present and the future I was about to build with Sam.
You're more beautiful today than I ever imagined, Sarah.
His words brought tears to my eyes, but they were happy tears this time. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. The ceremony was short but meaningful. We exchanged our vows, both promising to love, honor, and support each other for the rest of our lives. As Sam slipped the wedding ring onto my finger, I felt an overwhelming sense of belonging. This was my home, right here with him.
I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride.
Sam pulled me into a gentle kiss, and the room erupted in applause. In that moment, I realized I was exactly where I was meant to be. The reception that followed was a celebration of our journey together. There were no awkward relatives, no forced conversations, just genuine joy from everyone in the room. As we danced together, Sam leaned in close and whispered in my ear.
We made it. After everything, we're finally here.
I rested my head on his shoulder, feeling the warmth of his embrace. I wouldn't change a single thing. It wasn't just the wedding that made the day special. It was the sense of closure, of finally leaving the past behind. My family, my struggles with Chris and Emma, the years of being overlooked and undervalued, it was all behind me now. The peace I felt was indescribable. Sam and I spent our honeymoon traveling across the country, exploring places we'd always wanted to see. It wasn't a luxurious trip, but it was perfect for us. We made memories, laughed until our stomachs hurt, and truly enjoyed every moment. When we returned home, life felt different. It felt full. It felt right. We settled into married life with ease, continuing to support each other in our careers and dreams. Sam encouraged me to pursue my passion for writing, something I had long neglected.
You've got a story to tell, Sarah. People need to hear it.
His belief in me was unwavering, and with his support, I finally found the courage to start writing again. My first book, a memoir of my journey, was published a year later. To my surprise, it resonated with more people than I could have imagined. The messages I received from readers who had gone through similar struggles made me realize that my story had power. It wasn't just about me anymore, it was about helping others find their own strength. Sam was by my side every step of the way, celebrating every success and comforting me through every setback.
I told you, you're going to change lives with this.
His faith in me never wavered, even when I doubted myself. As the years passed, our life together flourished. We built a home filled with love, trust, and mutual respect. My relationship with Sam was everything I had ever wanted, and more. I never thought I'd find this kind of happiness, but here it was, right in front of me. And I knew that no matter what challenges came our way, we'd face them together. The past was behind us, and the future was ours to create. Looking back, I realized that every difficult moment, every painful experience had led me to this point. And for the first time in my life, I was truly grateful for the journey that had brought me here.